All right. Can you share with me what your name is and your business?
Of course. My name's Dave Regula, and I work with my wife, Lauren, who is the better half in the business and in the life. She's an Olympian. She's the face of our business called Strong Mom, and we work one-on-one with career-driven moms, as Lauren would say, to get their together.
How was your situation before um before hiring my team?
So the business situation wasn't great. We had kind of come, everyone knows this, right? In this space, ups and downs, great months. Unfortunately, we all measure in months too often and not quarters and years, but we had some really hard months. Um, and we're kind of trailing off, and we had someone in our seat that was at one point very good at media buying when we were a little bit smaller. And as we grew, just wasn't a good fit anymore. And this person was a good marketer, but didn't love the media buying spot. And so that put us in a tough position. We kind of identified that as a bottleneck. And I think the bigger part, and maybe other founders can relate to this, is me personally. Like I was like a tortured soul. Like I felt like we had built our business, Lauren and I, for two or 3 years, almost 3 years, and we were kind of had big goals. Our revenue, we were kind of at the 3 to 4 million a year revenue spot. So we kind of worked through some things, put a good team in place. And because of this media buying issue, we had these bad months and we were just trending in the worst way. And it made me feel personally like it was all gonna go away, right? It felt like we didn't have any answers for this problem. And to be honest, uh, I think a lot of people can relate to this too. Like everyone comes from their own place, right? Like our fulfillment product, my wife, that's her thing. I was very much from the sales and kind of internal business side, not necessarily the media buying side. And so I didn't have familiarity with that. And so it was like a math problem. It's like if you've taken calculus, when you get that problem, you stare at it and it makes you sick to your stomach. You know that you can't solve it and the clock's ticking. That's what it felt like with the business. Like I didn't know where to turn, to be honest. I can't looking back, the business wasn't in as bad a place as I thought it was. But me personally, I was in a worse place like than I could have imagined. And it affected all parts of my life, like sleepless, like waking up in the middle of the night, like sweating kind of thing, like thinking about this. And this was a business that we built from nothing to almost 4 million bucks the year before. Like, how could that be? That's how I felt.
Hmm.
It's a nice short answer for you.
No, it's a good answer. I definitely think you're better at business than you're a very humble person, man. What would you say you weren't able to do at that time that you wish that you could?
Well, I I wish I would have been able to hire somebody. I didn't know enough to put a media buyer in place. And I think people in our position are force-fed agency, 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 whether that's in your, and we get marketed to by the agency, right? Like my Instagram feed is like, hey, we'll get you leads, right? And everyone's got a friend in the space who has a marketing agency, right? Fun fact, no one likes their agency, by the way. They just don't know where to turn. And so that's what I felt like. Like we talked about this. I interviewed 3 or 4 agencies. Um, and then I finally interviewed one person. Like I think everyone should talk to somebody that's where they want to go. I talked to a friend who is at 15 million a year who helped say like, dude, in-house, have someone in-house, have the extra attention, have kind of your stamp on it. And so I think that helped me come looking to you, right? Because that's the nervous thing I think for people. Like that's your business. Your lifeline is your marketing and your media buying. If you operate on paid advertising, like mess that up and where do you go? right?
Yeah, agree. What what were your thoughts going through the process, like going through this process with us?
It was eye-opening. I guess it was pretty easy and it was really eye-opening. Like I didn't even know what to look for in this. I can hire coaches and I can hire someone in marketing, but media buying is different. I can hire somebody in sales because I know it. Um, Operations, all that. This is a space that I think is very foreign to a lot of people like me because we've always had agencies doing it, right? It's a black box. They don't want to tell you what they're doing. When it's not working, it's your fault kind of thing. So I didn't really know how to approach it. And I think you basically saying like, okay, here's the playbook, is important. That's one piece, right? Like how the nuts and bolts of how to hire the person. The second piece is like, I will say just on a personal level, the storm was brewing inside me, like the discomfort. And I think you did a good job on a personal level of like, and anybody that works with you is going to see like you're definitely a calming presence, which I think is the most important thing in a world of marketers that are flashy object. Here's my car in your face. Like the Zen approach, I've always appreciated, which is kind of where you come from. Thoughtful, introspective, like the process we use, designing our ideal hire, like those things. No one else does that stuff. We've actually taken some of those processes and put them in place in other places in the company, which I think is cool. So does that make sense? Kind of
Yeah,
give.
that's awesome, man. I appreciate that about the uh the Zen approach because that's what I didn't used to always be like that, but that's what I
No,
try to do. So that's great to hear.
it's a maturity level, I think, because we've dealt with a lot of different people, and I'm sure other people in my spot have, but like it's one of the things about online business and people that are doing coaching specifically, it's like the space is just filled with immaturity and insecurity. And to find, like, if whenever you can find somebody that's the opposite of both of those, I think you need to dig in and keep that relationship going, right? Like, just on a human level, that's who I need to surround myself with, anyways. And so to like find that with you in the process, like, it was very simple for me to make that decision once I got up to the start line.
W- Did you have any fears or doubts about going through the process and hiring an in-house
Yes.
media buyer?
Yes, I had big fears. Number one, we wouldn't find anybody. Number two, they were going to be too expensive. Number three, it was going to take too long to get them going. Like all of the things, like every scenario plays out because it's a true unknown, right? You've never done it and you don't know the position that well. And the things I found, which I quickly learned, was like, maybe I'm the only, Lauren and I are the only people that suffer this. We think everybody's going to be way more expensive than they are. Like we think there's like three candidates and there's nobody that's perfect for you. There is. There's a lot of people, like especially when you run a remote business, right? I just think the person's out there, they're gonna be excited to work, at least for us. And we like to compensate at a fairly high level, but like you're going to be able to find that person on a comp level and it doesn't take nearly as long as you think. Like the person, when you do the exercise and you design your ideal hire, like they're out there, they're excited to work, they want to plug and play, they want to learn your business. um yeah, I just think like it's a little bit like I think I was operating from a scarcity mindset in terms of hiring, and I think I'm not alone from talking to other people. um and the reality is like when you think about like the lever you're pulling with your media buying, like what are you doing by not solving that problem, right? Opening that bottleneck. Like that's the lifeblood of your business. Like looking back, I together with the person that we worked with at the time, like I think we both knew that our relationship had kind of reached our professional relationship had reached its spot. Like we still were friends and have a great relationship and have gone on to do bigger things, but like we probably waited too long. Uh, and so like that's the one thing I would say to anybody that's like suffering through, especially an agency relationship, just stop. Like I don't know how else to put it, right? Like even like the service and the attention I feel like I got from my agencies or especially like I was lucky. I worked with an agency that was like solid. You're still one of 10 clients on right on the load for your media buyer. But you hear the stories. If you're listening to this, you probably are one of the people that's just had this horrific jump from agency to agency thing. Like you don't need to do that anymore. It's like you mentioned it, I think. Like if you're in a horrible relationship with your partner, like then a little bit better relationship seems great. So like when you leave a horrible agency and you go to another agency, it's a little bit better. Their onboarding process is great. You have a couple more leads in the first month. You think like, things are wonderful. There's like levels of better than it can get. And I think people don't realize that.
Totally agree. 100% agree. And I still keep in touch with the person that you had running your ads in the past, and actually you freeing him from that role. He's doing great now because you
I
were
think
able to let go.
that's like there aren't many people like that in the space. And again, like I think you're one of the people, right? Like if
I
in
appreciate that.
2 years, if I'm off in wherever I am, like I feel like I could reach out and not as a client, you would say, hey man, I think this is something to think about. And that's invaluable in this whole thing. Like no one does that.
Agree. Totally agree. And I appreciate that. I try to be objective always, for sure. Um, okay, so walk me through once we got your full stack media buyer placed and he got in, walk me through um what happened after that. Like what happened and some of the things that transpired and changed.
Yeah, I think the biggest for us, and so this was, I guess, another worry that I didn't really mention is like, okay, we get the person in. I don't know how to manage the person. And so that was something that scared me, right? Because the agency always manages the media buyer. One of the big things was just getting the reporting process in place in terms of beginning a day, middle of day, end of day. What does that look like? What are the expectations or reasonable expectations for this person? What do the communication cadence and cycles look like? All those things that I didn't know, like you put them in place. And like you can talk to the guy, right? Like if there's something that comes up, you're talking to him. And coaching me a little bit on how to deal with them in terms of because there is or can be a different mentality, right? Like your sales team has a different mentality than your coaching staff, than your ops person, and certainly than your media buyer. And so helping me relate to like what could be going on in his brain space is a big help as well.
And then what kind of results did you get like right out of the gate
It
versus
turned,
where you were before?
yeah, it turned around and stabilized pretty quickly. Like I think 2 out of the last 3 months have been record months for us. One was about a 30% record in terms of new sales, and total revenue cash in the business. Um, yeah, it was wild. Like it whipped back, and to be honest, like it kind of verified the bottleneck for us, right? Like where we thought the bottleneck was. Um, yeah, we have our hope back. That's kind of like the big thing, right?
Do you mind sharing what you were able to accomplish last month?
No, so we did about 620, 619 in new sales. I think we were right about 790 in total sales. So that was we have a big resign in internal sales process to add to that. And then our cash was up towards 500K, which is, that was good. That was a record for us. I can't complain about any of that. Yeah, super cool.
How does that feel?
It feels fucking good, man. It feels really good. Um, it feels good when you see something that you believed in for so long, like do the thing that you think it can do, right? It's like your business is your baby, right? You have kids. So when your kid comes home with straight A's and you're like, I knew you could do that. You've been saying it this whole time. Like, then they finally do it, or they finally do something around the house like that you believed in, like feels good. Like it also makes you realize you're not crazy. That's always that's always a bonus. I, I feel like I wasn't crazy. Like we can do this. And the other thing is it's belief in the future, right? Like we can do that, then what's the next level, right? We have we love what we're doing and believe in it. So like we're going further.
What would you say that you're able to do in the business, lifestyle wise, that you weren't able to do before because of some of the issues that were going on?
Well, when we were kind of without media buyer, like I couldn't do anything. Like for me, that's the worry and stress of those moments. Like when we were interviewing agencies but didn't have anything solidified, like that was impossible. I'm the kind of person who wears, like, if it's not going well, like I'm I wasn't I wasn't doing well. Like it was very hard for me to operate in the rest of my life and be present, I guess. And for somebody that has three kids and needs to be at sports and supporting things, like not cool.
Yeah, I mean, you've been every time I'm like, what is this? What is this dude doing? Because you've been every time that we've talked the last like month or two, you're like, oh, hold on, man, I'm going to this airport, or I'm
Nonstop.
my car is driving and I'm texting or
Yeah.
whatever.
I think we had 10 or 11 overnight travel tournaments for between my three kids from January until, the summer. So yeah, it's crazy. It was crazy.
And then what kind of positive impact do you think that this has had on other people around you? Like being able to solve that issue, have that person in place, hit the record months.
Well, I feel like it's like everyone needs to ask themselves, like, what if they're their best self, if you are your highest version of who you are, like where does the ripple go? Like that's basically what happens. Like if the business is like crushing and I'm not stressed and worried about it, it frees me to be who I can be in other places. I mean, you can take that anywhere. Like, what has it done? Like, all the employees are obviously doing better, right? Because they're hitting KPIs and the people, like the atmosphere in the business is wonderful. We're bringing clients and our sales team's excited. Like, that's a given. But like on a personal level, if you're like the owner of the company or the founder or whatever, like your marriage is better, your kids are better, like everything you do is better, right? Like it's the biggest, if you, yeah, like you look at your life, like what's your number one stress? Like this was my number one stress. Like, yeah, I'm way cooler when I'm not dealing with this. Like everybody, everybody would know that. I'm like, I don't have as much to complain about.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and you're a great dad, man. You're always doing I've done the travel stuff before. It's incredibly hard. So I don't know how you do it for sure. So what would you tell someone who's watching this right now and unsure about hiring an in-house media buyer or unsure about working with me and my team?
I think there are, I mean, it's so if you're on the fence with this and you're stuck in decision mode essentially, which is safe, right? It's easier to sit there than it is to take what you think is a risk. Like there are two ways to look at it. It's a like to me, the risk is that you stay where you're at. Like if you don't make a decision and get off the fence, like you're in trouble to begin with. But the potential upside of this decision and going with the right person, and to me, running away as fast as you can from the agency, because you've been in the spin cycle. If you're here, you've been in the spin cycle of agency. There's no chance that you've been with one agency, because that doesn't happen, right? Like the potential upside on a professional and a personal level is the risk of not going for that is crazy to me. Like, and that's what essentially put me down the road, right? I looked 5 years into the future. What does my best life look like? What do I want? Like, do I want to be dealing with people who don't care about my company? Do I want to be stressed and tied up in Facebook ads manager, even considering that? No, I want like an internal team that loves my product, my people, my business, all of it. This is like a huge piece to that, right? Like you've probably thought about that if you're watching, you're like, oh, of course. But you've only done it in sales, operations, fulfillment. You've never considered this piece. Like this is the needle mover too. So like, what do you want? Right?
Great advice, man.